You're listening to the Current Plays Podcast, Season 3, Episode 9, Expeditions. Now please welcome your hosts, Jordan and Thomas. And welcome back, our corrupted listeners. This week we are talking about expeditions, specifically with the Gears of Corruption expansion, which was fortunate enough to get recently. So Expeditions, of course, is Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stegmaier. And so this game has been touted and advertised as the sequel to Scythe. And the one thing you hear all the time when people say that is, well, it's nothing like Scythe. It's a completely different game. That's because it is a completely different game. Um, there are a few borrowed mechanisms, and realistically, it's just the glory track, where you have to complete a goal, and when you complete that goal, you put a star out on the glory track for that goal. In Scythe, the 6 stars ended the game. In this game, 4 stars ends the game. But I could be totally wrong about this, but to me, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, this is the sequel to Scythe narratively. So if you played Rise of Fenris, Thomas, if you remember, there was a huge story to the whole world of Scythe. So when Rise of Fenris came out, it included this book that basically went over the whole storyline of the Great War that was the game Scythe, and then went into the story of the Rise of Fenris, which was a campaign game which had like a narrative to it, right? And the whole thing with Scythe and Expeditions, whatever, it's this 1920s plus universe. Getting that
Yeah,
right?
alternate history.
Right. Um, and Jakub Brzezalski, who did the world building and all the art for these games, like did this incredible job, yeah, building this world and building out a story. And that story continues with Expeditions. So
Mm.
it is the sequel to Scythe, but it's the sequel to Scythe in the narrative, not the game mechanisms, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I really I didn't know you had mentioned last night, or sorry, when we played games, that you had something to say, but then you didn't share. You didn't share
Yeah.
what it was going to be, right?
Well, I wanted
So
to get your reaction on
yeah,
the.
absolutely. And I really like thinking of it that way because I've heard all that exactly. This is the sequel to Scythe. I'm like, well, no, it's not. Really? What? Like, okay, some share. How? But you're right, absolutely. Narrative for sure. And then as soon as you add like the Gears of Corruption, it's like, yeah, it builds off more and more of that Scythe story, right? So you're getting, world building here in the he doesn't have an RPG in this setting, does he yet? Yet? Because I feel like it's a it's there's a world. It's definitely world building, right?
Yeah.
So and the narrative campaign that was Rise of Fenris was great. Like that was a cool ride, right? And then to have this give you more sort of backstory, more direction of what's going on. Um, it's really neat. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, like I like it. I love, that sort of trope, the alternate history trope. I love anything to do with time. Time is just a beauty. It's a huge thing. I know that's why people do it, right? So like
Yeah.
Groundhog Day, love the movie. That Tom Cruise one with Emily Blunt, I always
Edge
forget the
of
name for
Tomorrow.
it. Edge of Tomorrow. Love that movie.
Edge of
Right?
Tomorrow is
Like,
so good.
oh, it's so good. Like anything with some sort of time, whatever, even board game wise, Anachrony. Love the game, right? It's got that time focus, right? So, having a game with an alternate Indiana Jones. Wonderful, right? It's got, you're those sort of alternate okay, Indiana Jones, maybe not alternate, but you got a lot of that like World War II, this is what the Nazi party was doing kind of thing, right? But anyways, alternate history, love it. It's that it plays into that whole time. This is what could have happened. Had this even like the Fallout games, the same thing, right?
Hmm.
Uh, what if this happened instead of, this technology was learned or something, right? So yeah, and this one and Scythe is exactly that. Okay, what if we deviated here and we went like heavy into mechs and stuff? This is how mechs could, change the course of history, kind of thing, right?
Yep, yep.
Tesla becomes a bigger part of history, and it's very neat. Yeah,
Yeah. So I don't remember all the details of the narrative of Scythe, and we wouldn't really have time to go over it anyway.
yeah,
But basically, uh, like Thomas said, Nikolai Tesla develops this technology and basically changes the landscape of Europe in the 1920s or whatever, this alternate history. And these machines are used to bring about a great age of prosperity, but then of course humans being humans, we use them to go to war with each other.
naturally. Yeah,
So eventually the war ends. All the nations kind of if I recall correctly, they kind of got tired of the war. So there wasn't like one great winner that took
yeah,
over. Everyone just kind of stopped the fighting.
yeah,
And in expeditions, the story goes, some years later, a meteorite crashes into Siberia, and they research expeditions go to find out, go and investigate this giant meteorite, uh, and they all go missing. And weird things start happening around this crash site. So in expeditions, you've got all these different parties who some of them are heroes from the Scythe game, and then some of them are, new characters that we're just meeting for the first time in this game. And they are exploring Siberia, um, and moving. So how it works in the game is you've got tiles, like the map or the board is made up of modular tiles, right? Hex tiles. And there's three groups or categories. So there's the southern region, the central region, and then the northern region. And that represents you going, exploring further and further into Siberia up to find this meteorite. And along the way, things get weirder and weirder as you go further north. And the tiles get, you know, more difficult, or I should say, I guess the quests
yeah,
basically become more expensive as you get higher up. The rewards get better. Uh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. The spots are better as a yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah,
takes some more effort to get up to them, and then they deliver better rewards, but the quests, take more resources, et cetera, et cetera. So in those three separate regions, every game you're going to shuffle the tiles. So like all the south tiles will get shuffled, and then so they'll be different. All the central tiles will be shuffled, and so you don't ever get north tiles mixed up with the south tiles, but in amongst those same categories, every game is going to be different how they're positioned on the board. And positioning is pretty key in this one because a lot of the abilities revolve around, what's adjacent to the tile or what cards are adjacent. and you can activate abilities of adjacent things and stuff like that. So, and just finding the actions that you want to take. You don't know
Yeah.
where they are until you start exploring the tiles and you uncover them because the central and the north tiles start face down, and then you have to move to them to explore them to flip them face up. So what do we mean by that? So you've got these mechs. So in Scythe you had your hero meeples, and then mech meeples, and you moved your hero around, and you had four similar mech meeples. Well, in this one, it takes sort of that mech concept, and the mechs become sort of the star, and your heroes are cards. And so your mechs are moving around physically on the board. And it's not like in Scythe where every nation, so a hero would have certain mech. It mix them out. You pick a mech, you pick your heroes, or deal them randomly, which is cool. So you can, there's lots of replayability with the different combinations between those. You start at base camp, and then there are a few basic, well, there's three basic actions that you can take. You can move, which you're moving your mechs out on the board. You move 1 to 3 spaces, and if you move onto a tile that's face down, you stop and you flip it up, and you're going to get a map token for that. Then there's play, which lets you play a card, and the cards have the cards will give you a resource, and then they'll usually have some sort of ability, usually one that you have to place a worker on to activate that ability. And there are five, I think, different colors and of abilities slash workers, and you have to put the right worker on the right color, right? Then there's gather, which is basically take the action of the action space that your mech is on, and then there's a bunch of different actions that way, right? Now, where Scythe had, you take a top action and then you can pay for a bottom action. I think this is, I guess, the analogous part of that, even though it's not really similar at all. But those three actions, you've got this little cube, and you're going to cover up one action, and then you do the other two actions. So if you cover up move, you'll play and gather that turn. Then your next turn, you have to move that cube to a different action. So let's say you cover up play, then you're going to move and gather that turn. You play all your cards out, and then when you can't play any more cards, like eventually you're going to have to take a play action. You and if you can't, you then instead take a refresh action, which moves all of your used cards back to your hand. And then after that, the neat thing is you can do all three actions on that turn. So you're playing cards, moving around the board, and you have the goals, like I mentioned before, on the glory track. So there are things like meld meld for meteorites, upgrade for items, solve for quests, and then you've got like have 7 workers or 5 map tokens, have uh 8 cards, yeah, 8 cards, have 7 corruption tokens,
Have the
which are
20
these
corruption. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or the yeah 20 corruption. So these corruption tokens are out on the when you flip a tile, they're going to go out on the board and cover up some of the actions that you can take on that tile. So you go out, you're trying to gather resources, which are power and guile, and that's what you use to fight the corruption. You fight the corruption on these tiles. You're trying to get these objectives, and when you get there's a certain action you have to take to put a star out, and then once you get one player gets 4 stars out, that triggers the end of the game. There's one more round for everybody to play, and then the game's over. everything at that point converts to money, and then whoever has the most money wins. And so, when the game ends, then Thomas has the most money and he wins. So,
Yeah, I gotta say, out of all the Stonemaier games, I think this one's my favorite. And I'll go further in saying this one with the expansion is absolutely my favorite. The expansion just adds a few more key differences over the base that I changed this from being like a game where I'm like, oh yeah, that was fun, to like, oh, I had a really good time with this one. So it brings it kind of to that next level. And that was basically essentially when you start this game, you start off with the base game. You start off with nothing. So you basically you have your hero card and your animal companion card. And to speak to your narrative connection point here, um, those are cool because when you get the ones that are from like Scythe, you're like, I know this guy is very similar to any sort of narrative journey you might go on. You're reading a book or and you go to the second book and you're like, oh my goodness, the bartender is back from something like that. This is the same thing. Oh, I got this hero with this with their bird or whatever, right? Or their fox or whatever, right? It's the same feelings there when
oh,
reintroduce the character, right?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So base game, you get the two cards, and then you have your mech, and you have like zero power, zero guile, which are your two resources that you're playing with.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, go do stuff, go explore, go get more workers, go get resources, go get more cards, whatever, right? And you start from nothing and then build up that engine, and eventually you build it up enough so you can get your stars out first, and then hopefully the stars out first also equates to you winning the game, or at least being in a position that when the fourth star goes out, you have the most coins, right?
Yeah.
Or get the most. Now, what the expansion does, it gives you a starting meeple that's like a golden meeple that can act as any color. So, whatever your leader is going to be, you can immediately start using the bottom action that comes on each card, right? So, you can immediately start using that. But not only that, you also get a combination of guile and power as well. So right away, you can start using those resources to do other things, right? So in the past, when we've played this game, like initially, I remember when we played a four-player game, you and I happened to be like the first and second player, and I forget what order it was. But there's two spots on the board you can go to right off the start in the south region that are gain extra workers, and it's you pick between one of two colors, right? So you can go on one, and it's green or
Red.
red, and the other spot is blue or yellow, right?
Yep.
So you choose. So right off the bat, I picked one. I went to that one space. You went to the other one, and just the way you had mentioned where you put this cube, you can stay on a spot theoretically a few times in a row and not move, and then keep taking the action there, the gather action to get workers, right? So likely you're probably going to go on that spot and gather, and then you might forego the move action so that you can play a card and then gather again. And then maybe you go to the play, you block the play so you can move and gather, but you gather first and then you move, right? So you've got all of a sudden three workers there, right? And this is what happened in that one four-player game we played, where you and I took those spots, stayed there for a bit to get two to three workers, and then we left. Well, the other two players had no place to get workers, so they were like, okay, what do we do? And it put them that much farther behind,
Oh,
just for
yeah.
having a lack of workers, right? Yeah, they got some cards before we did, but they couldn't take advantage of the bottom part of that action, and there was no, bonus meeple from the expansion to really, so they just couldn't take bottom row actions. That was it. just how it is, right? It's not till you get to the north where you might uncover a spot that allows you to get the purple meeple color, right? And now in this game, when we played with the expansion, because of that extra colored meeple, I immediately was like, I'm gonna forego those spots and I'm gonna run ahead and start exploring. And that's what I did. I ran ahead.
Yeah.
My combination of workers benefited me or my combination of starting hero power and animal power benefited for exploring, so I wanted to do that anyways. But it gave me more of an ability to, I guess, to take advantage of that power, uh, just just with that extra singular golden meeple and some power and guile on the board. So I
Yeah.
immediately ran up and then eventually found I ended up getting one more worker I came back, like I went up initially and then came back a little bit and got a green worker. And then I went back to exploring until I found the spot where I could get purple workers. And then I ended up finding a spot right next to it that I could activate that spot and activate one next to it, the purple worker one. And I got like, 6, 7 purple workers out of just taking that spot. But that spot was important because it also allowed me to boost, which is how you place your stars on, right? So I needed to take that action, and then why not take the action that gives me 1 coin, which is your victory points, and an extra worker, so that I could take more use of those cards that I was getting, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it was
And
wild how, yeah, I was just able to do all that.
yeah. And in the base game, like you get a map token and it's like whoop-de-doo. Like
Yeah,
some of the mechs let you spend map tokens for things. Actually, that's one that you had this time around,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there are like a couple of cards that let you do that too. But unless you have one of those mechs or unless you've got those cards, the map tokens don't do anything really. Except like once you have five of them, that is the glory category.
Yeah.
But in Gears of Corruption, when you get those map tokens, you flip it over, you look at the back, and it gives you an immediate bonus, which just, makes your strategy that much stronger.
That much stronger. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Exactly, even if I didn't have a combination of those cards and the mech too, just because of those bonuses, getting that little something to it's in the base game, it's a little risky to uncover a spot because what if it's an action you really just don't need? Especially if you're covering up the play card and you're just going move and action and move and gather. Well, if you don't want to gather in the space you start the turn on, then you're gambling, okay, I'm going to move into this and hopefully it's a gather action that I can take advantage of, A, or B, just like gives me something, right? Because
Yeah.
like, say you get a spot that's, upgrade a meteor card or upgrade an item and you don't have one of those. Okay, well your gather action does nothing, right? So that's a big, but having a little incentive to go there at least would feel a little bit better. Okay, yeah, I took a risk. I went here. I got something, but then I couldn't do the gather action, right? Or at least couldn't do it efficiently,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's why I usually always try to explore on a turn when I'm not gathering, when I'm
Yes.
playing a
Yeah.
card, but I mean, yeah, like it's not always going to be the case, and you're not always going to have a card that, is that you want to play on a turn when you don't know what tile you're going to be on, right?
Yes.
So it might be great if you can go explore, flip a tile, and then you plunk down the corruption with the plan to play a card that lets you vanquish that corruption. But then you'd better have enough power and guile to, be able to vanquish whatever tiles happen to come up because the
Yes.
tiles in the base game range from 3, 4, and 5, and that's the amount of power or guile that you have to spend to vanquish that corruption. This expansion introduces two power or two value tiles. Um, Pardon me. And why that's important is the glory category doesn't care what the values are. It just wants to know, do you have seven? So it could be seven twos or seven fives, and one costs a lot more than the other. There are certain cards and stuff that do care about the color or the value of those corruption tiles, but again, unless you've got something like that, you really want to try to get the lower cost ones so that you can get as many of them as you can.
Yeah,
And they're
absolutely.
worth
Yeah.
points at the end of the game. They're worth 2 points each at the end of the game. So 2 points for 2 coins is a lot better than 2 points for 5 coins.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or not coins, resources.
Resources. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like that aspect. It just gives you more choices, really,
Hmm.
is what it does. It makes it a little bit easier sometimes to do that vanquish. And then I played a leader that was part of the uh, Gears of Corruption expansion that totally flipped sort of the script because generally the leaders will have, some benefit or a what is it? Is
Solve.
it solve? Yeah,
Yeah.
solve, which is basically, cashing in one of your quests. And then your animal companion will have some benefit or a vanquish ability, right? Well, mine didn't have that. So I didn't have those keywords, but they still sort of did those things just in a different way, right? So my animal allowed me to get rid of the corruption tokens and then tuck a quest without actually completing it, right? So kind of a solve, but not really, right? And
Yeah.
then my leader allowed me to just pick up a corruption token off of a spot. So kind of a vanquish, but not really. So it was a neat sort of difference. And I saw that on the board when we were picking characters, and I was like, I just gotta try that because it seems different and new, and I just want to see how that goes. And it worked really well. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun to play and figure out, right?
Well, we
So.
kind of realized like, okay, you're not solving the quest, so you're not getting the bonus from that solve, but you're also not paying the resources, and you don't have to be on the tile that the
Yeah.
quest involves, which is, normally the case. And I miscalculated at one point and set myself back a turn because I, went to a tile and then I went to solve the quest and realized I didn't have enough guile to actually turn it in. So yeah, that put me back. And then you had no quests. And I was like, okay, okay. I knew you were getting towards your end game, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's still a little bit off. He's got no quests on the board, and he's not going to end it with no quests. But then you're just like, well, I took one. Oh, I took one. I took one. And I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I didn't have to go anywhere to complete them, it was basically just like, yeah, okay, so I get rid of this corruption and now I tuck this here and I'm good to go. I didn't have
Yeah.
to, waste any time actually trying to complete that quest, right? Which was really neat. Yeah, it was fun. Um, Well, I was gonna say something else too about that, but I lost the thought.
Yeah.
But it was just yeah, it was a neat experience. I had fun playing sort of this different character, but still kind of the same. Same kind of action, just a spin on those actions.
Hmm.
But it's a neat sort of puzzle you're figuring out. Oh, I remember what I was gonna say. What I really like because I was able to pull up that corruption. And because my mech, essentially the power of my mech was like every time I get one of those map tokens, I can trade them in on my turn as a free action for either a power or a guile or one coin. So I was like, yeah, I want to get as many of these as I can. And I happened to just like I got a bunch. I think I ended like I had 11 I spent two throughout the game to get some guile, and then ended with nine, and then on my last turn, cashed in just for nine victory points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just bang, huge jump in points.
Yeah.
Um, but it just worked out so nicely. Like every time I went to a tile and got one of these things, I'd flip it over, and it was something that, was a benefit that I was actually looking for. Because sometimes you might flip one of these tokens over and go like, oh, I can't really use that benefit right now. So that's kind of sucks. But no, I flipped, I'd get something good, and I'd be like, yes. And then I'd be like, and I'm gathering, and look at that, I'm getting a draw a card, which I'm not doing the actions for. So this is great. I'm drawing a card or whatever. And yeah, it
Yeah.
just worked out. Everything just seemed to be going nicely every time I would explore and end up with a bunch of things. And then, yeah, it came down to I can either use these for more resources, and I never ended up having to do that because, I didn't have to vanquish because I had that ability to pull stuff off, and then I didn't have to spend resources for this or that, and because I just was able to like get around it I wasn't cashing in the quest how you're supposed to, so I wasn't spending resources to cash those in, kind of thing, right? So
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
really
yeah.
neat, yeah, yeah. And even like the other thing was, the other ability of my leader was he could meld those meteors by spending a power and a guile. Well, I bring him out, and by this time I had like, two stars or three stars on the board already. So he'd get two guile and a power. So I'd go up one guile essentially and lose, and then he'd pay for the other thing, and then I could meld one of my meteorites, right? And then, okay, here's a bunch of victory points just for doing that with really no cost, just a turn, which if you're spending a turn to move farther on a closer to a victory condition, I mean, that's a good turn. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, it ended up working really nice for me
Yeah,
in
this
the
one
end. Yeah.
I love the because you've got these okay, so there's these meteorites which will have a condition. So, like when you meld this, you're going to get $1 per thing. Maybe it's per purple worker you have, for example, right? And then usually there's a max, so it'll say max
Yeah.
3 is usually the case. Um, Now if you meld that, you get however many coins that you can get by meeting the condition. Hopefully 3. Then the next time you meld a meteorite, let's say you get 3 off that one. Well, that triggers and then the previous one triggers. So now you're getting 6 coins. And then you do it again. Now you're getting 9 coins. And you do it again, you get 12. So that's, you know, uh, and all that's just end game points, basically. The items you're going to upgrade. And then, so items will give you like a special action and then a special ability that stays on the board that says, whenever X happens, you gain Y or whatever the case. And when you upgrade them, you lose that special action, but then you don't have to place a worker on it anymore. It's just that passive ability just stays active. And then they're worth points at the end of the game. So you got those, and then your quests are kind of like the popularity inside. So if you have more quests, then each star is worth more points at the end of the game. And then there's the vanquish and the other things. So I did like a little bit of upgrading, a little bit of melding. There weren't a lot of meteorites out on the board in our game. We did see quite a few items, so I ended up gathering more items. And then, just as I'm like getting ready to start doing those melds and upgrades, I look over and I'm like, you're almost done the game here. So then I scrambled to get a couple of glory out. And I was trying my hardest to get a third one out, but just couldn't make it happen, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I love this game really has that like tension of you're building up an engine, you're trying to get your stuff going, trying to get it to work, but there's that tipping point where like you got to rush to the end or else your opponent's going to rush to the end and you miss out.
Yeah, and it's almost got that like that Scythe style where like on your final turn you're trying to lay like 2 stars if you can.
Right.
There can be situations where you can do that in this. And in our game, two of the tiles that lined up beside each other, one tile allowed you to sweep the cards. I'm not going to explain that. We don't have enough time. Um, but the other thing was basically you could take the action of a tile beside it, and the third part of that tile was that you get to boast and place
Boast,
down a
yeah.
star, right? So one of the tiles beside it was another boast action. So theoretically, if you took that tile action, you could have boasted, and then if you had, you know, the ability to, you could have boasted again and placed 2 stars at once, right? But
Yeah.
this game's harder to line up multiple stars on one turn. Um,
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
happen, but it's harder to do, I find, than side might be, right?
I managed to like, do back to back turns where I could boast.
Mhm, mhm.
Um
I feel
so
like that's more accurate. Yeah, that's
yeah.
that's more common. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I love this game. It's one where because that end condition is sort of open, yeah, you can really try and do all of the things and push your point score up at the end, but then your opponent, again might rush to the end and beat you there and end up with more points. So there's that tension the whole time of what's my opponent doing, that's just it's great. And the
Yeah.
solo
Yeah.
mode runs really smooth. The Atoma's really smooth. And solo, this game's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. Highly recommend. This one's fun. Like I said, one of probably my favorite Stonemaier game.
Yeah, that's high praise.
Yeah. Yeah. With a catalog like they have for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Expeditions by Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games. And that wraps up another episode of the Current Plays podcast. Check us out next week on YouTube or your favorite podcast provider. But until then, good gaming and good night.
Good night, folks.